Good morning, everybody. Welcome to California Department of Veteran Affairs and the California Transition Assistance Program Agent Orange Exposure webinar. We'd like to thank you all for joining us this morning. There's some people still trickling in from the waiting room, so we'll kind of wait a little bit. First off, I would like to say my name is Kirk Eller. I'm a training coordinator here for the California Department of Veteran Affairs in the CalTAP unit. We have a very good webinar for you this morning with some informative information about Agent Orange exposure. We're going to be going over some housekeeping items first. We also would like to ask you to keep your microphones muted and your video turned off for bandwidth purposes. That will keep you from a distraction for any other attendees for this webinar. You should have received some information in the email confirmation about the webinar regarding our Veterans Resource Book. You should look like this. It's downloadable. We'll be posting a downloadable link in the chat so you can access the PDF version of this resource. There's a lot of valuable information in it for you to use at future reference. I highly recommend you to download this and keep it for your future use. Also, we have an agenda that's a lot of information. We're going to go over some California specific benefits from Calvet, as well as our link coordinator, Lance Juncker here from the San Diego link is going to provide some roles and information on his responsibilities. And then we have James Ridgeway, an attorney and partner for Bergman and Moore law firm, is going to give us our keynote speaker for Agent Orange exposure. And then we'll follow up for a Q&A virtually at the end. Speaking of the Q&A, if you're not familiar with the questions and answer tab, if you look at the bottom of your toolbar, I highly encourage you to open that tab. And if you have any questions during this webinar, please use the Q&A tab to direct them to our questions person. We have my manager, Angela Frank, is going to be fielding those questions and addressing those and filtering them out, and we will get to them in the Q&A, or we will address them in the Q&A tab directly. She will also be putting some information and resources in the chat for you to download throughout this webinar. So keep that open and you can access those resources as well. So now the CalTAP version, my name is Kirk Eller again. I am a Marine Corps veteran. I served from 1986 to 1990 as a helicopter crew chief in Tustin, California. And after separating, I worked civil service in federal agency and then went into the civilian DoD work. When I was laid off, I went through and earned my bachelor's degree through my Chapter 31 Veterans Readiness and Employment. And now I'm here at the California Department of Veteran Affairs. I'd like to go over some of the CalTAP overview, what the CalTAP program is. I'm going to go through this rather quickly so we can get to the important information about the Agent Orange. So if you do have any questions about this, if I missed something or went too fast, please contact us or put it in the questions and answer tab. We will address it during the Q&A portion. So what is the CalTAP portion? CalTAP is designed to inform and connect veterans of all eras what their benefits for federal and state benefits are, and then also provide continued support and assistance as those needs change over time. How we do that is through 5 pathways: our core curriculum, education, employment, entrepreneurship, and we have a 5th pathway for service providers. This is what our Veterans Resource Book looks like from the front page. And then this is what our homepage looks like for calvet.ca.gov. You can access all that information through the chat. There will be some links put in there, like I mentioned before, throughout this webinar that you can access and download that information. The CalTAP button that you see highlighted there has the icon, the laptop. That will take you to that CalTAP web page, which has all the pathways listed here. And then at the bottom of the page, there's an archives tab that shows previously recorded webinars. And with that, I wanted to mention that this webinar will be recorded and posted in this location at a later date. So if you have future reference for this, you can access it there as soon as our communications department gets it posted. So how can you use CalTAP online? On our homepage, the CalTAP page, you'll see a tab that says Core Curriculum. The Core Curriculum pathway highlights 11 different various modules of topics that are self-paced that you can access on your own. I would like to highlight the number 4 module that has introduction to claims and compensation, which coincides with the topic of this webinar. So if you have any information or want to go through the lesson for claims and compensation, you can browse through this or review this at your own pace. And also it gives you information and resources available on how to do that properly. I do recommend that if you do decide to file a claim or compensation, that you use an accredited veteran service officer to file that claim on your behalf. Module 5 is what we're going to focus on for this portion, which is your California specific benefits. So what are your California specific benefits? Well, they start in Chapter 1 in the resource book, as this snapshot shows. On the right-hand side, it will show regional outreach for our link coordinators, where they're located and how to get in touch with them. One of the very popular benefits is our college tuition fee waiver. This enables veterans' dependents to attend any state-funded school and have the tuition waived. There is 4 plans available, and they do require that you have a service-connected disability rating from 0% to 100% from the VA. We also have DMV programs where you can have your veteran designation put on your driver's license, or you can order honoring veterans license plates, which will highlight Gold Star families or Purple Heart recipients, or have your unit logo put on your license plate. The fees for these license plates, however, are noted that the fees go to veteran funded services, so they don't go back into the state's general fund. You can also apply for a motor vehicle registration fee waiver if you have a service connected disability with mobility issues. Excuse me. Turn my phone down. This registration fee waiver, if you have a service-connected disability of 100% from the VA with mobility issues, you can have your registration for that vehicle fees are waived. Other benefits are fishing and hunting reduced fees and a state parks designated veteran pass, where reduced for free of charge. You can access any of the state parks throughout the state. Other benefits are tax programs, the disabled veteran property tax and the business tax fee exemptions. I highly recommend that if you have interest in those, you contact your local county. The tax exemptions for each county may vary from county to county. So if you do have a disability of 100% service connected, contact your county to see what exemptions you may qualify for. We also have a Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise Program, or DVBE. If you are a disabled veteran and you own a small business, you can certify as a DVBE to contract with the state of California to sell goods or services with departments throughout the state of California. Calvet home loans, it's very popular. We have home loans available throughout the state of California at different loans. You can also combine that loan with a VA federal guarantee for no money down or low money down, and it provides excellent competitive market interest rates. We have a excellent home loans person, Brad Pedersen. His information should be located in the chat. If you have information, any interest in a home loan, please contact Brad Pedersen. He will give you all the information that you need on how to apply. Calvet Women Veterans is also very popular. They provide information, advocacy, and outreach, as well as support to California women veterans. They also partner with the California Women Veterans Leadership Council, and there's also a statewide roster on their homepage you can sign up for here to receive information on upcoming events, such as the Women Veterans Reception, which is held annually throughout the state. The Calvet Minority Veterans is also popular. It provides information and advocacy and outreach, as well as support to California's minority veterans. And they also help with unnaturalized veterans in California with citizenship and naturalization services. This is what their website looks like. And they do also have a statewide roster you can sign up for information and upcoming events and to stay connected with them. Our Calvet homes for long-term care provide excellent service for our aging veterans, medical, dental, pharmacy, and rehabilitation services, as well as fun activities. 8 locations throughout the state, from Chula Vista to Redding and Barstow to Yountville. They're beautiful homes and they take real good care of our veterans. There's 3 state cemeteries throughout the state, one in Seaside, up in No Coast, and then another up north in Redding. and the third is attached to the Yountville Veterans Home in Yountville, California. You do have to be a resident of the Yountville home to be buried at the cemetery in Yountville. Some other common websites you may be familiar with that you should be recognized are the va.gov. The va.gov is the self-portal that you can access all information and questions about your healthcare, disability records, or education benefits. So it is a very well-known site that you should be useful. Now, another benefit is the eBenefits webpage. This is where you would go to sign up or manage your benefits through the VA. And if you do have a claim or compensation, I do, like I said, recommend contacting a county veteran service officer or an accredited VSO. But this benefits page will allow you, if you have education benefits, or you can manage your benefits and look at your payment history or upload documents and make appointments with the VA, etc. My Health eVet is if you're enrolled in VA healthcare. This is a great web portal that you can access your health records, message your doctor, make appointments, or get any pharmaceutical needs that you have. So CalTAP would like to stay support your endeavors in future use. So how you can do that is provide your non-DoD email to CalTAP at calvet.ca.gov. We will have a webinar survey following this webinar. We highly encourage you to fill out that survey, and that will also give us support information for you. And then on our homepage, on Calvet's homepage, you can register for My Calvet. My Calvet is a great source for you to filter out and receive updates on specific benefits that you may be needing. You can also add us on Facebook at Calvet Veteran Services and like us on Facebook. And you can also attend webinars like this to stay connected with CalTAP. This is the California Department of Veteran Affairs phone number. If you have information or questions about that, call that number. You will receive a live person, or somebody will call you back directly. This is the CalTAP portal at CalTAP
Kirk,
email.
Could
yes,
you share your screen, because we can't see the numbers or anything?
I thought I was sharing my screen.
Yeah, it's not working.
I'm sorry. Do I need a backup? Thanks for letting me know, Lance.
Sorry it took me so long. I should have done it earlier, but didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay, well, I'm going to go forward. I will have this posted in the website. This is my contact information as well. You can access any questions here and like us on Facebook, and this is my email if you have any questions. Now I'm going to turn it over to our network link coordinator, Lance Juncker. He's our San Diego link, and he's going to provide information on the roles and responsibilities that he does. Lance?
Hey, thanks everybody for showing up today. Yeah, my part's just real quick here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the local interagency network coordinator or link position and what we do here at Calvet. I too am a veteran, 82nd Airborne, was wounded in Iraq in 2007, went through the medical retirement process and all that kind of stuff. So if you see the next slide is the link map. This is the map of California, and we'll show you the 8 different regions broken down by the FEMA disaster relief zones. And there is a dedicated link in each of these regions. So no matter where you are in California, or if you move, there is a designated link for you in that region. And really our job is to get to know that local region and what's going on in the veteran and active duty world there, and pull it all together and be kind of like a resource and referral expert for you. So no matter what kind of issue that you might be going through or just have questions, make sure that you reach out to your local link, because they're going to have some great info for you. As you can tell, the regions are not geographically the same. Cole up in the north has a massive region, and Ben Gales in Orange County has a much smaller region. It's roughly broken into population, but not necessarily a veteran population. San Diego, where I am the link, has the most active duty in the entire country. We have 8 different military installations here. So my job looks a lot different than Cole's up in the north. There's a lot of things going on here in San Diego. We have over 300 different veteran service providers providing veterans with all kinds of services free of charge. And, you know, the links wherever you're living will know what is in your region and what's available to you. So wherever you are, make sure that you write down real quick that email address. And if you don't get it in time, you can reach out to me and I can hook you up with your link if I am not your link. Next slide. A little bit about what we do. We provide outreach to service members, veterans, and their families. We make referrals constantly and work directly with those established network service providers that we have here. So a lot of nonprofits, government agencies, county agencies, you know, all kinds of things we try to pull together and make sure that, you know, we get you to the right service. We also assist with local emergencies. So anytime there's the big fires or floods, we will go out to the local assistance centers that are put up, and we will provide veterans with services there in emergency situations. We also provide leadership and advocacy at the local communities and really try and drive, you know, veteran specific policies that help, you know, as much as possible. Looks like it got small somehow. The next slide, please. It's just going to kind of tell you more. I mean, no matter what it is, whether you're trying to find a job, whether you're needing, you know, emergency financial relief, if you, you know, service dog, I mean, just anything you can think of, you know, contact your link and they can help you get to the right people. So, you know, if you're having trouble with healthcare on the VA side, you know, we have some contacts high up at the VA in our local regions. We can try and assist you there, or EDD, or any of your state benefits. You know, we'll always get you to the right place. Next slide. I think that's pretty much it for me. This is my contact information. So either SD link at calvet.ca.gov or my name, lance.juncker at calvet.ca.gov. That will get you, you know, to me. And if you have a link, if you're in, you know, Northern California or whatnot, I'll get you to the right link and make it work. So that's about it for me. And I'll turn it back over to Kirk or whoever is the next presenter.
Thank you, Lance. And my apologies, everybody. I apologize for my screen share. I thought I had the information on there. And I did post our veteran resource book and our link map, as well as a PDF of this slide presentation in there, so you can access the slides and the information. If you do have any questions about our California benefits, please reach out to us. And now I'm going to turn it over to James Ridgeway, a partner at the Bergman & Moore law firm. James is a partner as well as director of training and programs at the Bergman & Moore law firm. He teaches law as an adjunct professor at George Washington University Law School, and he is also author of Veterans Law, Cases in Theory, and other publications. His work has been cited by the Solicitor General and the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. James served as a judge on the Board of Veteran Appeals, where he was Chief of Policy and Procedures, and later Chief of Strategy, Innovation, and Programs. He is past president of the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims Bar Association and editor-in-chief of the Veterans Law Journal. James received his undergraduate degree and highest honors in physics and history, and he graduated in the top 10% of his law school class at the University of Virginia. So James is here to provide information on Agent Orange presumptive claims. And with all, I'll turn it over to James and he can give you his slide presentation. Thank you for joining us, James.
All right. Can you see and hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right, good. I will go ahead and get started then. Thank you so much, Kurt. And thank you for having me here. This is a field that I've been involved in for a very long time, and I'm always happy to help. Both my parents were Vietnam veterans. My father flew F-4s out of Da Nang in Thailand. My mom was a protocol officer in Thailand. And I learned about this system from dealing with my own claim for educational benefits after my father passed away. So this is a topic that is near and dear to me, and I'm happy to help. And we've got, what, I think 212 slides to do in 30 minutes. So let's go ahead and get started. Next slide. Okay, this presentation is divided into 3 parts. And hopefully when you look at the slides later, that'll help you break it down. But basically, first, we're just going to talk about simple direct service connection. I know there's some folks here that are relatively new to what's going on here. So we're going to start at the very beginning, and then we're going to move on to presumptive service connection, particularly for Agent Orange and how that's different and what makes that easier to win than a typical direct service connection claim. And then finally, we're going to discuss some strategies for meeting and talking about a claim for service officers, and then for the veterans watching, how that conversation should go, but sort of the practical aspects of how do you do a good job of filing the claim once you understand what it is that you're trying to do. All right, next slide. So yeah, first thing we're going to talk about is direct service connection. These are the rules that apply to every type of benefits, a compensation claim, not just specifically Agent Orange claims. And then we can talk about how Agent Orange claims are different. Excuse me, a little dry in the throat today. All right, so in order to receive VA disability benefits and care, they have to have a veteran has to have a disability that is service connected. And basically that means they have to show 3 things: that there's a present disability, that there was some sort of in-service disease, injury, incident, or accident, and that there is a nexus or connection between the 2. And nexus is kind of a special word in this area of law. So you will see and hear that term used a lot to talk about that connection between the 2 things that you have to show. In most circumstances, the veteran has to prove all 3 of these elements. And I'm going to walk through them each before I then go into how presumptions change that. So next slide. All right, first things first, you have to have a present disability. And that can be a diagnosis of a disability or even just symptoms of a disability. If a veteran has symptoms of a disability that haven't been diagnosed, then VA can provide an examination for the purpose of diagnosing that, if there's an indication that those symptoms are related to service. Or more recently, under the law, even without a diagnosis, symptoms can be granted service connection, because the ultimate question is whether or not there's a functional impairment, not whether there's a medical condition. Now, the important thing to understand for Agent Orange claims is that exposure alone is not a disability. And so what we often see are people who file, a claim for Agent Orange. Well, no, Agent Orange is not a claim. It's not a disability. It can be how you show the nexus, but the claim is for a specific condition. It can be, arthritis or diabetes or a form of cancer or hearing loss or a psychiatric condition. You file the claim for the disability, and then you show that it's related to something that happened in service. But be careful, don't file a claim for Agent Orange. That's not actually a claim, and VA may just completely ignore it. You have to specify the disabilities. Next slide. Then you get to the in-service incident. So the compensation claim requires that the current disability is traceable to some sort of in-service incident, disease, injury, or accident. Sometimes it's a specific trauma, some sort of accident that the veteran was involved in. It can be a disease that manifested in service. It can even be the general rigors of service, the wear and tear of marching and drilling and all of that over the years leads to arthritis at a relatively young age, or whatever the situation is. The exposure to noise in service that then leads to the hearing loss, which is the present disability. This is a very broad criteria, and so it's not some specific thing that you have to show. And very importantly, the incident does not need to be documented in service records. The VA struggles with this sometimes, particularly at the front lines. They don't want to credit anything that isn't documented in service records, but that is not legally required. Although sometimes veterans have to appeal on to the board or even the federal courts in order to get VA to recognize this and give them service connection for something that's related to something that wasn't documented. All right, next slide. So, and then we get to the big one, the Nexus Requirement. So the veteran has to prove a connection between their disability and whatever it is in service that they're saying caused that disability. And this is where most claims that are lost go wrong. People typically, when they apply for compensation benefits, they have a current disability. That's easy to notice. And showing that something happened in service is not that hard, because the veteran's own lay statements, that this is what happened, are generally good evidence. Although again, the ROs often don't credit them. Sometimes you have to appeal to the board. But the hard part is the nexus, and showing in most cases that this has to come from a medical professional who has good information and can provide a well-reasoned opinion as to why this current condition is at least as likely as not to be related to whatever it was that happened in service. And so one of the big questions that you're looking at for a condition that didn't first manifest in service is, can you get an opinion from a doctor? Will the veteran's treating physician provide an opinion? And trust me, I'm a doctor. I think this is related to service is not an adequate opinion. It has to say, these are the facts that as I understand them, and this is why I think it's related based upon this information or research or experience or whatever is the justification. Now, in many cases, VA will assist the veteran by providing an examination and getting an opinion, but very often those opinions turn out to be negative. And so if you can work with the veteran's physician to get a positive opinion, that can be much more successful. And if a negative opinion is obtained, you'll want to check that very carefully, because often the negative opinions from VA doctors are flawed in some way or another. But that's a topic for another time. Next slide. So that brings us to presumptive service connection and how that differs from the ordinary rules. So next slide. Now, I'm going to gloss over some details here. It's important to understand that there are actually many different presumptions. There isn't just one presumptive law. There was one law that was passed for Agent Orange and herbicide claims. There's another law that was passed for Gulf War claims, one for radiation claims, one for Camp Lejeune claims. And they have a lot of similarities, but they're also different in the details. And so I can talk here sort of what the general structure is, but it's important to recognize that this is a simplification. Like there's more to it than that, and every different type of presumption is different from the others. And so you can't assume because Agent Orange claims work this way that that's exactly how any other presumptive, say for Camp Lejeune, works, because there are differences. But the basic idea is that for a veteran with qualifying service and a qualifying health condition, the legal presumption removes the need to show a nexus between the in-service event and the condition. So now let's break that down. Next slide. So there's really two different presumptions. If you have qualifying service, then there's a presumption that you were exposed to, in this case, Agent Orange, or really one of the herbicides. It doesn't have to be Agent Orange. And then there's a second presumption that if you have certain health conditions, then those are caused by exposure to Agent Orange. Or again, really it's dioxin is the nasty part that's in that there. And so a claim can be granted using both of those presumptions, one of those presumptions, or neither of those presumptions. And so just because you don't have qualifying service or you don't have a qualifying health condition doesn't mean that it's not possible to win a claim. It just means that the burden's going to be on the veteran to prove some things that are not always required if you benefit from these presumptions. So the next slide. So start with the presumption of exposure. The big one is that if a veteran set foot in the Republic of Vietnam between January of '62 and May of '75, they are presumed to have been exposed to Agent Orange. That's it, period, full stop. nothing else needs to be shown. They're presumed to have that exposure. Recently, as we'll talk about, the presumption now also applies to those who were on board ships in the territorial waters of Vietnam, basically within 12 nautical miles. Now, this does not apply to those who merely flew over the airspace of Vietnam. However, and again, this is where it's important to note that these presumptions are really a patchwork of lots of little laws that were passed at different times. The presumption does apply for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, because that was actually originally passed in a different act before the main Agent Orange Act, and it's written using different words in a way that includes those who flew over Vietnam. So not that you'll remember that necessarily easily, but it's important to recognize that there are all these little differences in there, and you need to look them up and be aware of them. All right, so next slide. The presumption that those who served on board ships within 12 miles is a relatively recent change. That stems from a court case in 2019 that Congress then followed up with legislation to clarify all the little details about exactly where the nautical border is. For those that had previously applied for compensation for a qualifying condition and had it denied, VA should be automatically re-adjudicating these claims. The veterans should not have to file a claim, but doesn't hurt to file one, just in case something got lost. And so if you've got a Blue Water Navy veteran, even if they think they have claimed a condition in the past, you can go ahead and file that claim asking for compensation for whatever the condition is to make sure it gets adjudicated. Next slide. Now, there are many other places and times where exposure is presumed to have occurred. So at the perimeter of air bases in Thailand during the Vietnam War, for periods of time in the Korean DMZ, for those who are on certain C123s. There's a list of them I'm gonna go through, but let's go to the next slide. So the first of these additional presumptions of exposure applies to the perimeter of air bases used by the United States and Thailand during the Vietnam War. This one is not technically a presumption in that it's not created by Congress or formally in regulation. It's a direction from the central office to make a finding of fact that their exposure occurred for those that were on the perimeter. And so it could be revoked by VA more easily. The key part of it is when you look at the direction, it says this exposure presumption applies to security police and dog handlers and anyone else otherwise near the airbase perimeter. The folks sit down at the regional offices, they understand security police, they understand dog handlers, they generally do a good job of applying presumption there. They don't understand what it means to be otherwise near the airbase perimeter. And so what you often find is that if you've got somebody who served on one of these air bases and was near the perimeter on a regular basis, that claim is going to get denied by the regional office, and then you have to appeal to the board in Washington, D.C. To get a judge who will exercise some common sense and some judgment to grant these claims. Next slide. These herbicides were also used in the Korean DMZ for periods of time. The 2019 Blue Water Navy Act just changed the start date of this presumption. So even if you've known about it before, make sure you got the start of that presumption correct. It's now September 1967 to August of 1972. Another aspect of this to be aware of is the regulation. The law says it applies to those who operated in or near the Korean DMZ. But when you look at the manual instructions to frontline adjudicators, it just says operated in. The or near language disappears. We don't know exactly what or near means. If you've got somebody who may qualify under that language, you can expect that their claim will be denied at the regional office level, and it'll have to get appealed to the Board of Veterans Appeals But even within that, we really don't understand what near means. That's just never been clarified. But it's important to recognize that you don't have to have been in the DMZ, even though the ROs will typically treat that as a requirement. Next slide. Then we go on to the C123 airplanes that were used in Operation Ranch Hand to spray these herbicides over Vietnam. Well, those continued in service for decades afterwards. They were given to Air Force Reserve units. And so there's a presumption for those with, quote, regular and repeated duties flying on or maintaining contaminated former Operation Ranch Hand aircraft that they were exposed. And you can find a whole list of those units online. And that's the easiest way to make a determination. Theoretically, if you were not part of one of those units, you can use lay evidence to show that you had regular and repeated duties, but this is a much harder one because regular and repeated duties is difficult to show if you don't have some type of order attaching you to a unit that is one of the ones that was where these planes were assigned to. So that regular and repeated duties language matters. Next slide. And then apart from that, Agent Orange was tested, stored, and used in many other places. VA has a 16-page list of other times and places where these herbicides were tested or stored, that if it's on the list, VA will recognize that exposure occurred. And this list spans from 1945 to 1977. But even beyond that, claims are not limited to even these recognized times and places. A veteran can show that they were exposed pretty much anywhere as long as the evidence actually supports them. And so one of the things, and we've got an upcoming burn pits webinar, I think, that is emerging is that the really nasty stuff in Agent Orange is dioxin, and dioxin is often produced when you burn things like plastics with jet fuel in a burn pit. And VA is not currently recognizing that these Agent Orange presumptions would apply to burn pits. But you can certainly make the argument, if you support it with evidence, that the dioxin, the active ingredient, is produced in the burn pits, and those exposed could potentially also ask for compensation for a condition that right now VA recognizes is only something caused by one of the herbicides used in Vietnam. So next slide. All right, so that all was the presumption of exposure. The other half is the presumption of causation. And so if a veteran has a qualifying health condition, and there are many of them, and you can print out the list in 3.309E and have it handy, but these include things like leukemia, Parkinson's disease, Hodgkin's disease, type 2 diabetes, prostate cancer, ischemic heart disease, lung cancer. The veteran has any of those things, then they have the exposure, that's it. The compensation is granted. They don't have to show anything else for there to be a nexus between that condition and something that happened in service. Bladder cancer, hypothyroidism, and Parkinsonism have recently been added to the list, so definitely update your list if you've got an old one. Next slide. One thing to understand about the cancers on this list is that cancers metastasize, so they often spread to other parts of the body, and VA's cancer presumptions apply to the type of cell that became cancerous, not to where the cancer was found. And for example, prostate cancer is a presumptive condition, and prostate cancer, it's treatable quite often if it's found before it leaves the prostate, and then becomes extremely serious and very hard to treat once it metastasizes and starts taking residence outside the prostate. And so even if it's found in the heart or the lungs or the brain or whatever, if it is prostate cancer, if the underlying cells are prostate cells, that's a condition that is presumed to be related to exposure to Agent Orange for a person who was exposed. But make sure you understand the type of cell that was found, not just where it was found. Next slide. Okay. One aspect of these claims is understanding that the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine produces these reports as mandated by Congress with the most current research. That a contract has since expired. I'm not aware that it has been renewed. So the 2018 report may be the last one, but we'll see. But typically VA has created a presumption when a condition reaches the status of limited or suggestive evidence of an association between a condition and dioxin or any of the other chemicals. So, and this is a very recent development in the law, but VA is considered to be constructively aware of these reports and must consider them even if they're not submitted as evidence. So that is a recent change. I don't expect you will find that to be true at the regional office level. You very well may have to appeal to the board to get consideration of these reports for a condition that's not presumptively service connection. Next slide. So in 2014, the Academy added bladder cancer, Parkinson's-like symptoms, and Parkinsonism and hypothyroidism to the category of limited or suggestive evidence, which is when VA has typically added these things as presumptives. VA didn't actually take action. It's not required to do so when it reaches this level, but historically it has. And then finally in January of this year, Congress stepped in and made it by law that these are presumptive conditions. One notable thing is that the law says Parkinsonism, but it does not mention Parkinson's-like symptoms, which the underlying reports treat as a different thing. So you want to be very careful. If you got a veteran who's diagnosed with Parkinson's-like symptoms, to check with a doctor and see if diagnosing him or her with Parkinsonism is medically correct. Because if they use the right word, then the claim becomes very easy. Next slide. So we're still waiting for VA to really start processing these. But again, if you file your claims now, you should get the best effective dates for your veterans whenever they are ultimately granted. And you want to make sure you get that matching diagnosis. And sometimes the medical records will use a slightly different diagnosis, and that can cause problems. So if you can clear that up before you file the claim, that can make things much easier. Next slide. So hypertension is a special snowflake in this world. So in 2018, hypertension was upgraded to sufficient evidence of an association. So this is even a higher category of recognition that there's a scientific link here. And yet VA has still not made this a presumption, and Congress didn't act when it passed the law this year. So this is one where the research in the Agent Orange updates ought to be used to argue for service connection under a direct basis. But again, this is one that you'll likely need to appeal to the board to get a trained judge to do the analysis, because the non-attorneys at the regional office are not likely to do it without orders from Washington, D.C. to grant these claims. VA says they're doing their own studies, and they've been saying that for years and years, but that's where we are right now on hypertension. Next slide, please. And then it's important to understand that service connection can be granted for even non-presumptive conditions. But the important thing is you have to have some proof that is based upon the specific risk factors of the individual veteran. It can't just be some doctor saying, well, I think this condition ought to be recognized as related to Agent Orange. Now, what you typically need is, this veteran's case is different because the normal risk factors are A, B, and C. None of those risk factors are present in this case, and herbicides have been associated with causation, and so therefore it is at least as likely as not that this particular veteran's manifestation of glioblastoma or whatever it is from Agent Orange, because it's not from any of the other known risk factors. Next slide. So given all that, then the next step is, okay, how do you actually go out and make one of these claims as successfully as possible? So that's what we're going to talk about next. So the big keys: make sure that you sign up with an accredited service officer who knows what they're doing. Identify and gather the evidence up front. and then submit a full claim package using the correct VA forms. It is much easier to file it right the first time than it is to spend years appealing a denial. Like, we all have heard of confirmation bias. Once a person, gets it in their head that something is true, it's much harder to dislodge their beliefs about something. So once VA thinks a claim doesn't have merit, it makes it that much harder to get them to grant it, never mind the extra work and time that it takes to go into it. So next slide. For the veterans, you want to sign up with an accredited service officer. You want to make sure that, you want somebody who's accredited, somebody who's been trained and recognized by VA as having the proper skills to do these things correctly. So you want to make sure that the veteran's information is in section 1, even if the claimant is, say, a surviving spouse. You want to fill that out correctly. That's a mistake we do see sometimes. Next slide. Now, when you're beginning the process, particularly as an advocate, you want to explain the general rules and process to the veteran and build some rapport by doing an initial kind of assessment of the strength. The idea is you need to develop some trust with the veteran because it's important to get all the relevant information up front in order to have the best package as possible. And veterans will share more if they trust more. And so you want to establish that. And then you can plan the next steps afterwards. And then you should set reasonable expectations as an advocate about what's going to happen next, how long it'll take, and also prepare veterans that VA may require them to attend a compensation and pension exam, which may or may not be a good experience, particularly if it's been contracted out. But it's important that they cooperate, they attend, and they be as transparent and open as possible, because if they withhold information, that can make it much more difficult to prevail in the end and make things take a lot longer. Next slide. So in terms of identifying all the relevant information, you want to make sure you go over the deployment dates and locations to see if there's any qualifying exposures. And if not, talk about what actually happened to determine what exposures occurred and how you can prove that through lay statements, buddy statements, or whatever other evidence might be available. You want to make sure you walk through the current diagnosis and any symptoms in terms of making sure that the story is complete, particularly for things that are not presumptively service connected. The date of onset and the progression over time are important, but they're also important for rating the claim. And you also want to make sure that the treatment providers, past and present, especially if there's ones that might be able to provide a nexus opinion if needed for a non-presumptive condition. But if you have somebody with exposure, ask about all the presumptive conditions. Particularly if a veteran comes in because they've developed a form of cancer that is related, they may not realize that something as simple as diabetes or a heart condition is presumptively related. So you want to ask about those things, even if they're not brought up. Next slide. So then you want to fill out the right forms, which is typically the 526EZ is the standard form for filing a claim. VA will not recognize or process a claim that is not filed on a standard claim form. If you do use the wrong claim form, they will try and send you the correct one. They may not be right, but at least you'll be in the process and you'll hopefully get to the finish line sooner rather than later. And then you want to supplement it with a bunch of other materials that could be relevant. Next slide. So when you look at the claim form that you have to use, you want to, if you've previously ever filed a claim for any benefit and there's a claim file number, you want to include that to make sure everything gets kept together. It's extremely common for VA to see veterans with the same name, even same home address. You've got fathers, sons, et cetera. So you want to make sure you get that file number on there. Next slide. Then you want to make sure that you claim all the disabilities. Again, don't just write Agent Orange, list all of the disabilities. And then you can put Agent Orange as the exposure in the second column. And then below that, there's a place to list all of, it says VA and DOD facilities, but private treatment records are important too. And it's a problem that they don't actually ask for those because if you don't have proper assistance, many veterans don't realize that they should be providing that information. Next slide. So this is the private medical records release form. So you want to include that for all the places where the veteran's been treated for the relevant conditions. Although you can and just get those records yourself, or if the veteran already has them, and just submit them directly to save time and avoid problems. And that can even let you take some time, and you can winnow years of records down to the important stuff so that it's easy for the rater to take the time to read and find the important stuff rather than sorting through hundreds of pages. Next slide. And then the veteran can provide their story in a statement in support of claim. And we always say, just don't submit a naked claim. Don't submit a 526 with nothing else. It's always good for the veteran to explain their story and help VA understand. That typically makes all the difference in some cases that are more confusing. And VA will often be suspicious if the story doesn't come out until years into the process. And they'll be like, why didn't you tell us that up front? That, do we really believe you? And so tell the story up front. Next slide. And we're very close to being done here. So then as an advocate, you want to let the veterans know to look out for notice that records couldn't be obtained or that an exam has to occur, to contact you when a rating decision happens so that you can figure out what's next, to be in contact if the medical condition worsens or if something like a mailing address or dependents need to be changed. And oftentimes, some of these claims may be denied and they may need assistance with appealing or disputing an unfavorable decision. So next slide. And then finally, don't forget to help veterans enroll for healthcare, because oftentimes they don't even connect the two, and VHA and VBA don't talk to each other. So better to have access to healthcare and not need it than to need it and not have yet applied for it. Next slide, and I think that pretty much wraps it up. And I'm happy to take questions. And thank you so much for inviting me here. And I wish you all the best of luck in your claims. I hope you find this useful.
James, thank you. That was very awesome information. We appreciate your time and taking the time to come and provide the slides to our attendees and viewers today. Now, everybody, we're going to move to our virtual questions and answers. We did have a couple questions in the Q&A tab. I would like to put up our questions page, and this has all of the contact information for myself and all the presenters. Please note, if you do need to reach out to James, he has Paul Sullivan will be his contact for emails for the Director of Veteran Outreach at his law firm there. Now we're going to move to the questions. We had a couple that were already answered. We had one about some GI benefits. Received undergraduate degree in '78, was a Vietnam vet. He would like to attain his master's degree and see if he's eligible for benefits. We do have a 800 number for the GI Bill hotline to find out if you still have benefits available. If you have consumed all of those GI benefits, most likely you've used all the GI benefits available to you, which is typically 36 months of benefit. There's nothing available for a master's degree. I would recommend looking into a scholarship program to assist in any of that funding for a master's program. The next one was, how long do you have to be exposed to an agent? A day, a year, or a month? And this one also has an open question, is, would the security police clause work for those who worked where the C123s were stored?
Sure, I can take both of those. First, in terms of what level of exposure, it's undefined. And internally, VA attorneys will sort of admit that it's a one molecule rule. Like, there is no minimum amount of exposure in the law. And so therefore, any amount of exposure, no matter how little, no matter how brief, ought to be sufficient. And then the second question was, so there's the security police provision for those at the Thai air bases. And then there's the C123 provision for those that worked on those planes after they came back from Vietnam. My answers always are, this is what I've seen in the law. And so the first answer is I've never seen this fact pattern addressed by either the board or the court. So I have no data to tell you. I can give you what I think will happen, which is I don't think that either the board or the court would probably make that connection. They would say the security police in Thailand get that presumption because the herbicides are sprayed on the border. The C123 staff get that presumption because there may have been some residue inside the planes or possibly on the outer surface of the planes. But somebody who just was security around a plane stateside after it came back, probably not going to be found to have had any exposure.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Appreciate that. The next question would be, what is the cost to secure hiring an outside legal firm for your claim, and how are they compensated?
So the first two parts. First things first, you do have to be aware that there's a lot of folks recently have come in claiming to be consultants, not lawyers, that are operating outside the law. The basic law is that you cannot pay somebody to help you with your claim until it's been denied. And so anybody who says that they're going to help you up front and charge you for that's not legal. These folks who call themselves consultants and think they have a way around that has yet to be tested. I certainly wouldn't want to get into that field. And these people sometimes ask for bank account information and other things and take benefits going forward. So there's a lot of shady stuff happening there. But there are a lot of great attorneys and people who do provide valuable help. Lots and lots of claims. An accredited representative is going to be able to help you with some of the harder stuff. You may have more success. So, our firm does a lot of claims for people who were exposed and then later developed glioblastoma, which is not a recognized condition. Like that can be really hard to win without some help. But the basic idea is the firm will get a percentage of whatever the past due benefit is that it's awarded whenever that claim is awarded. And then all the monthly benefits going forward, the firm doesn't get anything else of that. So however long it takes, the firm will get a percentage of that award if they win. And if they lose, they get nothing. And then if it goes up to the federal courts where I work, the federal courts have a provision that if we win at the federal courts, then the government pays our hourly legal bill. And that can be a separate issue from, if you ultimately win a percentage award.
Okay. Thank you for that answer, James. The next one is a Korean War veteran from 1970 to 71, having trouble getting records to submit denied claim. How can he speed that up?
Sure. Yeah, I was actually just at a conference this weekend where the acting undersecretary of benefits gave an update about this. So the National Personnel Records Center has this huge backlog from COVID, and it is taking absolutely forever to get stuff. What he basically said was that the best way to get records is to file the claim and explain what you need, what you expect your records to have, because VA has its own staff getting records. So if it's in connection with a current pending claim, the VA staff will go into the stacks and pull the records and copy them and upload them typically within a few days. But if you're trying to get them on your own before you file a claim, you could be waiting for months or years, and you want to get the claim filed because your effective date, how far back you get paid, can hinge on when you filed the claim. And so don't wait trying to get the records on your own. File the claim now, and hopefully VA will be able to get those records far faster because they're paying their own staff to get them and not relying on the archives.
Okay. Excellent answer. Thank you for that information. I don't see any other open questions at this time. If you do have a question for any of the information that was provided, or James Ridgeway himself personally about any legal specific question, please use this information that's on this slide to reach out to one of us and contact us directly. or you can put it in the Q&A portion tab real quick and we can try and address it here. If not, I'm going to move on, and thank you, James. I appreciate you addressing the Q&A, and then we were going to move to our upcoming webinars. We would like to give you some information on upcoming webinars. We have another one going on later this afternoon for the City of San Francisco College, City College of San Francisco. Oh, we have another question. I apologize. Does Agent Orange and Blue Water have the same presumptive conditions?
So yeah, Agent Orange and Agent Blue, yes. It's one set of presumptions. All the rainbow herbicides are covered by the presumptions. So it does not matter. And if you go into the National Academy's reports, like they break down all of the different toxic things. Dioxin was by far the big one, but there were definitely other problems too. And so potentially, if you were showing that you were exposed to something specific like Agent Blue outside of a place where presumption or exposure is presumed to have been occurred, and you're trying to show that you have a condition that isn't recognized as caused, you might have to get into the specifics of which agent it was. But in general, no, it does not matter.
Okay, thank you. And another question that just popped in was, a person's father was 100% service-connected VA, and he died of complications from Agent Orange after Vietnam. And he's worried about some of his offspring's children or grandchildren having autism and the nexus or connection with that. Is there any connection with that disorder with Agent Orange?
So first and foremost, under the law, at present, there are benefits for children of Vietnam veterans who were born with spina bifida or a few other different birth defects. And the rules are a little bit different for men who served and women who served, but spina bifida, is the big one. So that's the law in terms of what's available. In terms of the science, there is an emerging and increasing concern with the epigenetic effects of exposures. So, what goes on in your body is not just determined by your genes, but which of those genes are turned on and turned off. And whether or not they're turned on or turned off is based upon what methyl groups are attached to your DNA. So if you have a methyl group attached to a particular piece of DNA, that may mean it doesn't produce a protein and it has no effect. And then if that gets knocked off, all of a sudden it's producing proteins and now it has an effect on your body. Your genes have not changed, but how your body operates does, depending on which proteins are actually active from your genes. Now, getting to the second part of that, the thing that's really interesting, scary about all this epigenetic stuff, the stuff that changes what happens without changing your genes, is that we're discovering that this stuff is inherited. So the original research deals with survivors of the Holocaust. And we've learned that certain genes are activated or deactivated by intense periods of stress. Not only that, but whether those genes are active or inactive is something that passes down to future generations. So you could be prone to depression or some other psychiatric condition, not because of what happened to you, but because of what happened to your grandparents. So it is what effects these types of exposures have on future generations is an emerging area that needs study. But under the law right now, the only thing that is compensable is spina bifida and a few other birth defects for Vietnam veterans' children.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that answer. And I hope that answered the question of the attendee that was requesting that information as well. Hopefully that answered his question.
Sorry, that was probably too much, but it's an area that excites me.
No, that was, I think that was a very appropriate answer. I understood it very well. So thank you, sir. No other open, another one, so yes, thank you. It did answer the question. So we appreciate all your feedback in the Q&A tab, folks. We do. So with that being said, if we have any more questions, like I said, please contact us. The contact information was on our previous slide. See the upcoming webinars. We have some really good topics coming up, not just for education benefits, but also for VR&E, which is veteran readiness and employment as well. So, and healthcare services coming up on the 12th. Following up with this series of webinars with the Bergman and Moore law firm, we have one coming up on the 14th next Thursday for Gulf War illness and exposures of that. And then again on the 21st. So along with this same lines of information for these webinars. So we hope you join us if you have any of these questions coming up for these webinars. I'd also like to address you in the chat. We have the survey that was posted. We do ask that you please take the time to take that survey. We value the information and the feedback that you put in that survey to tailor our webinars to focus them on the needs of our veterans and make sure you guys are receiving information that you're asking for. So thank you for taking the time to fill out that survey. And with that being said, I would like to thank all of our panelists today and our speakers, and James Ridgeway and Lance, our link coordinator from San Diego, for speaking and presenting today. And I want to thank all of our attendees. Thank you for your service. This is our contact information one more time. And please contact us if you have any questions, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you, James.
Thank you.